Welcome to Revenue Mavericks, the podcast where today's most iconic GTM leaders break down the mindset and the moves that defy the status quo. In each episode, operators share the playbooks they've used to change the game and deliver outsized growth. And now, here's the host of Revenue Mavericks, CEO and co-founder of Carrot, Justin Schreiber.
Welcome, everyone, to Revenue Mavericks. This is the podcast where we have the opportunity to have great discussions with some of the folks that are on the forefront of go-to-market. And my suspicion is that this episode will certainly not be the exception. We have an excellent guest that is joining us today. It's Stephen Hamill. He is the Chief Revenue Officer at 8x8. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Stephen. First of all, we are both alums of Oracle. We survived. We're still alive. And I'm sure that we speak a common language that someone who hasn't been at Oracle may not understand. Fortunately, though, Stephen has had some great experiences beyond Oracle. He's been at some great companies, Adobe, Genesys. Maximind was the first stop in his illustrious career. So I have a suspicion that Stephen is going to have a wealth of knowledge to share with us. First and foremost, Stephen, thank you for joining us and welcome.
My absolute pleasure. It's lovely to meet you, Justin. And you're right about Oracle. There's a language that only us Oracle alumni can speak. So,
and it is. I'm out in the Bay Area, and it's amazing the network that stretches from San Francisco across the globe. I know that you are not in the United States, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to chat. But Oracle has done an incredible job of building a global network of excellent professionals, whether it's from the technology, the sales, the market, the go-to-market side.
Yeah, indeed. I'm in Singapore, as you know, but I spend about a little bit less than half of my time in the US, and I spend a good deal of time in Australia and Europe as well. So I should have bought a caravan, really. I tend to travel the world quite a bit.
Well, that's a great place to start. You have tremendous international experience. I see some pictures over your shoulders there. Are these all pictures of places that you've lived in the past?
Well, these are actually, I'm an avid photographer. So these are my own photography that I've sort of collected, and some of my favorites that are on the wall here in my office. But excellent. Yeah, travel photography mostly. That's
a great hobby. And it's nice to know that we still have photographers in the world with all this fake imagery that we're seeing with AI.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the good thing about if you've got a hobby like photography, it's more about yourself. I suppose it's a little bit, people talk about the same thing about golf. They say that they play golf because it's them playing against themselves and how they improve. And photography can be a bit the same. So, the AI thing, that's okay. Photography is for me.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and start with one of my favorite questions. And that is, tell us about an experience that you had pre-professional life that you feel has really shaped you as a professional.
Okay, so I'd probably say that it would be two converging things effectively. So maybe when I was a much younger man, and I'll probably give away my age now, there was this device that came out. I went to a school in South London. It was a particularly sort of, at the time, it was an underclass, low class neighborhood. Most of us were immigrants. Most of my friends are African or South Asian or Jamaican or Irish immigrants. I was an immigrant from Ireland. And so brought up in that area, we went to a school that we all survived. It's actually quite an affluent area now, but I got some reason, I don't know how, I got into this computer programming thing back in 1981. There was this product that came out called a ZX81. It was a 1K plug it into your TV computer. And I was absolutely obsessed with this thing. And I just loved this notion that you could create code and make things happen on a screen. And so it became this hobby of mine that, just really showed what a nerd I was. When I wasn't watching Star Trek, I was writing code on this device that demanded that you write code efficiently because there was no space. And so that became a real big hobby. And then as I left school, and there was no notion of university at the school I was at, but rumor has it more of my friends went to prison than went to university, which is a terrible indictment on the school. But I decided I wanted to get into sales because rumor had it that you had control over your own destiny. And rather than taking an office job where you might have 20 years to get your boss's job and it might be I don't know what's the word. It might be a little bit more career shortening if you could be successful in sales. And I kind of went into that. And very shortly I was selling polystyrene, but very soon after I was able to converge what was my hobby, i.e. Technology, early technology and sales technology. And so that's kind of like been where those two things converged. And, people say to me, was that deliberate? It wasn't really. And they say that if you can make your hobby your income, you never work again. And I think I've been lucky in that sense without having a degree to be able to get to where I am.
You mentioned a few times that you grew up in an area where there wasn't affluence. It sounds like you were one with a diverse group of people, but maybe it was a bit of a hard scrabble life in those early days. How did that shape you and kind of frame your perspective moving forward?
I think there are many sort of answers to that. One is that it says it shows you what you don't want. You can look at your surroundings and say, I really need to get out of here. This is not where I want to be for my long-term future. And it also means it's sort of like the University of Hard Knocks of that kind of upbringing says, I can do whatever I like. I can make things happen. You've got the kind of resilience to get on with things. And I see it as a positive. It worked very well for me.
I think all of us long for the comfortable life, but when we look back across our days and years, we realize that it's those challenging moments that really shaped us and turned us into who we are. And perhaps the thing that we're the most grateful for is the adversity and the struggle that we went through.
Yeah, there's lessons in all of it, and I wouldn't give any of it away or replace it with anything else. It's good. And some of my best friends to this day are still my friends from when I was 5 years old. So that's awesome too.
Now, the story about the early foray into computing resonated with me as well. I don't tell this to many people, but I was the Harvest Park Junior High School 8th grade computer programmer of the year. It was all basic. I was working on an Apple IIe, and this will kind of put it in perspective. My teacher didn't even look at the program. He just asked me to print out my program on, you remember that paper that had the trackers on both sides, the holes, and it
on
was
the dot matrix
printer. So I would print out page after page, and he would just flip through it really quickly, and then he'd say, "That's an A, that's a B, that's a C," and that's how he would grade all of the papers. So,
oh my goodness,
they didn't
back in the day where
to grade the programs back then.
And that was back in the day where we saved everything that we wrote on a tape cassette. Do you remember that?
That's right. And it made all these weird noises. You knew that you were doing big work if the noises got really strange coming out of the machine.
Yeah, it was. I remember those days fondly.
Well, clearly, the path that you landed on, whether it was deliberate or somewhat serendipitous, has led you to a great place. Our guests are always our audience is always interested in learning a little bit more about the career trajectory. How does one actually land in the top sales spot at an organization like 8x8? And I'd be interested in your personal story. Specifically, was there a moment or an inflection point in your career that really set you on the path that you're landing in today?
I guess one of the things I've always struggled with is the world's notion that salespeople are this zombie, sell at any cost, mindless army of sellers, and that's not actually true. Most sellers are very conscientious, and they believe in what they do, and they believe in the companies that they work for. And so I spent a lot of years very consciously trying to do the right thing for my customers back in the early sales days, and letting sales go that I knew I didn't have a solution for. And I used to listen to a lot of tape cassettes back in the old days in my car, and trying to learn this notion of what is good selling and what's good, what's that about. And so I kind of applied that for all my life. And I remember one of the sort of reinforcing times for me was I was working with a media company. It was a newspaper that was moved, that was also a media company. And they figured that newspapers were probably a thing of the past. And they wanted to get into this sort of digital space and figure out how to monetize what they were doing. And I got to know their chief, I think his job at the time was Chief Transformation Officer. And he said, we love what you guys are doing at the company I was at the time. He said, we'd love you to respond to a tender and help us figure out what our digital strategy is going to be. And I said, yeah, I'd like to be involved in that. Got to know him, really tried to understand where they were going, what they were doing. And we responded to this tender. And he called me and he said, look, Stephen, we've had some nice conversations. And he said, I really respect what you do and what you know. And he said, I'm going to tell you something I shouldn't tell you. We've got 15 tenders out and you're currently at number 14 on the list. He said, you've got to have a look at what we've asked for again, and you've got to revise the scope because you're not going in the direction we're asking for. And the price is through the roof. He said, what you're trying to propose. And I said, look, the problem is that what you're asking for isn't going to solve your problem. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, look, you're asking for something that I think is going to fail you. And you're going to look at me and say, we bought from him and it's going to be bad for me and it's going to be bad for you. And he actually said, I hope you don't mind. He said, all right, smart ass. That was his words, not mine. He said, come back with what you think we should be doing. And I said, I'd love to show you that. So he said, give me a week. I came back and did a presentation for him. And I said, look, you really need to be doing digital first. You need to be having your journalists creating content for the website and repurposing that content for your newspaper as the secondary, not the other way around. And he said, that's really interesting. Would you be prepared to talk to our CEO? And I said, of course. So he made a meeting with his CEO. In fact, I remember he made it and I was in Sydney at the time and I didn't have a jacket. I had to borrow a jacket off a friend of mine and it was about 3 sizes too small and my shoulder blades were touching. I almost couldn't shake hands with this guy. This jacket was so tight. But I got to meet their CEO and did this presentation and he said, all right. He said, I like that. He says, we're going to buy your solution. And we went from number 14 out of 15 to number 1, and we sold them a several $1 million deal. And it was the biggest deal, well, it was certainly in the top 3 biggest deals the company did that year. And what that reinforced for me is that if you stick to your principles and you have a solution that exactly meets the customer's needs, you shouldn't be afraid to let them know because they're probably buying the solution for the first and maybe only time in their career. And we're doing this every single day. And so having salespeople that are able to speak with conviction about the solutions that they're building for their customers, for me, has been reinforcing and it's really stood me in good stead. Does that kind of hit what you're asking?
That is a great story. It reminds me actually of an experience I had when I was young. I was out on a sales call with my dad. He was a sales guy. He would sometimes take me out on the road with him. And he sold jackets. This is old school, non-tech selling. He'd walk into a small department store and he knew the buyers. And in many cases, these were small. So the buyer was the owner and he talked to them about what they needed. And one of the things my dad would always do is before he started the conversation, he'd walk into the back room and he'd look at their inventory. He could get a sense for the styles that they liked, what was selling, what wasn't selling. And I remember listening to him talk to the owner of this small store. This had been in the family for many generations. And the owner got really excited about a particular jacket that my dad had. And he said, I'd like to buy 10 of those. And my dad said, you shouldn't buy 10 of these. And he said, well, why not? And my dad said, you have too much inventory in the back. You only need 3 of these. I could sell you 10, but honestly, that's not good for your business. And the guy ended up buying, 3 or 4 jackets from him instead of 10. Small numbers, but the point is my dad walked away with less than half the sale that this buyer or this owner was willing to give him. And the reason is after my dad walked me through it, he said, if I keep selling him too many jackets, he's going to go out of business. And that's not good for anyone. It's not good for him. It's not good for me. And at the end of the day, if he trusts me, we're going to have a long-term relationship. And that story has always stayed with me about putting the interests of the customer first, even if in the short term, it doesn't necessarily benefit you.
Yeah, and lots of salespeople need to understand you have to trust that process. It does work. The only job I've ever applied for was my very first job, and I've never asked for a promotion, and I've been promoted all my life. So if you do the right things, good things come. You don't need to push it or force it. And so, yeah, I stand by that.
The other thing I was really interested in talking to you about, you have had a lot of international experience. You've lived in many different places. We started talking about the pictures on the wall. I think that's MBS in the back there is one of the locales. So that's clearly, we've got Singapore. What are the other spots that you've got on the wall? And tell us a little bit more about your international career and how that's shaped where you are today?
Yeah, so look, I moved to Australia when I was 26, and as I mentioned before, I was born in Ireland, went to the UK, went to school there, moved to Australia, and I was working in companies where I got the opportunity to be looking across the region, working in Asia and working in wherever else. And Australia is an awesome place. But looking after Asia and India and parts of the world around here, it's much easier to be in somewhere like Singapore. Just from most days you wake up in the wrong city anyway if you rang an international or a national role. But at least you could be in a city closer to the city you should be in that day. And that was kind of the thing. So I've been here for about 13 and a half, 14 years I've been in Singapore. It's an awesome place. If you obviously know MBS and you recognize it from the picture, but it gives us access from here to, you can be in India in 4 hours, you can be in Jakarta in an hour and a half, you can be in Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam and Philippines. It's very easy to get around one of the largest populous regions in the world very quickly. And the fun thing is, people say to me, why do you do that? And the only answer I can come up with is I'm a masochist, because it's hard. It's really difficult working in some of these geographies. The buying behavior is different. The customer needs are different. The ability to sell on value is harder because the cost of labor is less. And all of these things work differently in every geography. And I love that. I think it's just so interesting. You go to bed every night and you think, that was a really interesting day every day. It's a good thing.
I always found it ironic that we tend to lump, we call it APAC, as though it's one region, where really, Japan is very different than India, is very different than ANZ. And you need to understand the behaviors, the preferences, the approaches, and treat each of those with respect. So I agree with you. It's exhilarating, it's challenging, and it can be exhausting, because you're right. You get on some of those trips and you find yourself in 3 different countries in 3 different days in 3 different time zones, and it wears you out. You got to have endurance.
It does. And people say to me all the time, which one do you love the most? And I invariably say, how many kids you got? I know you've got 5, right, Justin?
I do have 5 kids.
Yeah. And if I was to say to you, which do you love the most? You're going to say to me, I love them all the same. And I say, well, are they the same? And you're going to say, absolutely not. And the notion is, you can love things for different reasons and love them equally. And I love going to India as much as I love going to Japan, and I love Australia and going to the US. It's just such a great, it's just an absolute privilege to have this life and be doing these things.
I think that one of the hallmarks of a great international executive is that curiosity, and really for them, the fuel is the diversity and kind of the novelty that you're able to experience each day. It is not a routine job. If you're a routine person, that's probably not the right place for you.
That's for sure. That's absolutely for sure. But but it's worth it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, I like to call it the secret sauce question. Over the course of your career, you've seen many different approaches to business, sales in particular. I'm interested in a framework that you have landed upon, or some kind of a process or a point of view that you feel has really unlocked outsized growth. And I'll cheat a little bit. You recently published the CRO mandate in 2026, which my guess is it's a distillation of your thinking. Maybe we could use that as a starting point. Tell us about what the thesis is behind that piece and the motivation behind writing it.
So the piece was more about what is the role of a chief revenue officer in today's world. And I think that it goes into the depth that says being a CRO is no longer running a sales organization. The sales organization is within it. But what you're trying to build is a scalable business that is durable. And it has to be, like I talk about it in the sense that as you add to the business and grow it, it has to be like, you have to blow it up like a balloon. It just gets equally bigger and expands, rather than just tacking things onto it that becomes some kind of Frankenstein monster. You have to be able to do that, which means that you have to figure out, how do you build a business that doesn't have too many exceptions throughout it? So if you've got, you can be a hybrid here, and we're going to give you this patch this year, and we're going to do these things, and now I've got to undo it because a year later the business has changed. You have to be able to build the business so that it can scale from the ground up. And I have 4 key guiding principles about how I operate my team and operate my business. And maybe this is interesting to you. The first thing is, we need to hit our revenue number. we're a sales organization, right? Number one, you've got to, this is table stakes. You have to have that to play, right? The second thing we have to do is make our people successful. And I've worked in lots of sales organizations or been invited to help sales organizations where they say, look, we haven't got a very good sales team. You might have to swap them out. And you get in and you find out it's not the sales team at all. It's a perfectly fine sales team. It's the enablement doesn't work, or the infrastructure's not there, or the marketing's not giving them the leads that they need. So the second thing is making your people successful, because the sum total of your people's success is your success, right? They are what is my success in sum. The third thing you need is, as I said, build a scalable business. And that means to say that you have to think ahead. You can't just be making piecemeal, for this quarter we're going to do this, and next quarter we might change it. It just doesn't work, and it just saps all your energy, and it just disrupts your people. People have to be agile. Like, we have to help our people understand that agility is important, and that a company that's changing is healthy. But at the same time, it can't be like knee-jerk reactions to things. It has to be growth and expansion. That makes sense. And then the fourth thing is that you have to build a business that's recognized as best practice. And that means to say that you have to be respected by your competitors for playing a clean game. You have to do the things that are necessary, like making sure you've got your compliances in place and your trainings, and that you're not breaking the law, and that you're not, disparaging your competitors and doing all of those horrible, ugly things. You need to build a clean business that people are proud to work for, and proud to sleep at night and say, look, I like what we're doing, and I feel part of something that's bigger. And I think those 4 key guiding principles make it much easier. Well, that's, for me, makes it easier to make all my decisions. Does it hit number 1? If it does it also hit number 2? If it does, then does it hit 3, and does it hit 4? And that's kind of how I build that out.
The order is important. I agree that winning is the purpose. I think sometimes we lose sight of that, ironically. And at the end of the day, everything is in service of winning. But I see how the second, third, and fourth point all ladder up to that first point, which is you build an organization that's successful and it delivers the results that you need. It does.
Yeah, and it scales, which is super, super important. But to answer your question about what are the things that how did you put it?
What is a framework or a process that you
frameworks
discover delivers outsized results?
So the framework that I use for the sales side of the business is this: that there are 4 levers you can pull as a CRO or as a head of sales or as a head of revenue. Is you can sell more things to more people more often at a higher margin. So what that means is you can sell more things. You can create new products and services. You can package things differently so that they appeal to a different cohort of audience. You can create new products. You can create new services. So you can build new things to sell. You can sell more things to more people, which means to say you can then take an audience that you have that's a customer and sell them more things, or you can find more customers to sell things to. Mm-hmm. You can do that more often. So if you're in a subscription model, how do you get them to use more of your units of whatever it is that you're selling? Or you can, or else you can get them to buy things monthly instead of yearly, if it's those kind of things. So more often at a higher margin, which then says that you can look at how do you increase your value and then increase the cost, the price to the customer, because you increase the value to them, you should be entitled to charge more. Or you can reduce the COGS, like the cost of goods and services, so that the margin increases. The thing that where this works really well is it's not this plus this plus this plus this, it's this times this times this times this.
That's right. Exponential.
And if you get those, it's exponential growth. And if at the beginning of every year as a sales leader, you say, how do I sell more things to more people more often at a high margin? You give yourself the framework for how are we going to take our business into the next year.
Do you have a specific example where you have applied that framework and seen impact at some point in your career?
Yeah, look, I do it every day. It's like it's worked for me and I've never changed it. So in all of the sales organizations, it's how I think. It's how I sort of apply that. Because the good thing about a framework is you can develop it over a lifetime and you can test it and fine tune it. And that one has worked for me just exactly as it is.
What I love about that is the exponential component of it. It's amazing how a 5% increase in, the products that you sell, and a 2% increase in the pricing, and a 3% increase in the frequency all adds up to a material amount. And then year over year, that compounds and becomes the new starting point that you can build on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot easier to get to the big numbers than saying, how do we sell 5 times as much? That's a big ask. I do a 500% growth in sales. Well, what about if we just did a 50% growth in sales, and we did a 50% growth in selling more things to our existing customers, and we do a 50% growth in time to sale, and we do a 50% improvement on the margin? You actually can do it much more easily by going across those 4 channels.
I think that great sales leaders are able to distill down complex concepts into very straightforward models that people can use. That I'm never going to forget that model that you put together now, because as soon as you said it, it's intuitive. And yet I hadn't really put those pieces together like you did. But now stepping back, it makes total sense. And the nice thing is it gives you focal points. You can go into your team and you can say, how can we sell more things? Let's focus on that in this conversation. Now let's focus on selling to more customers. How can we do that? Gives you discrete problem sets that you can solve against.
It doesn't. And to be honest, many of your listeners will be going, yeah, I do that. I just don't define it that way. So it's not like I didn't invent it. It makes sense in this framework.
Yeah. The other thing I like is you said that you've used it time and time again. These tried and true frameworks that deliver results are universal. And the more you use them, the better you get at applying them. Yeah,
indeed. I suppose that's the wisdom of old age. It's where the gray beard comes from.
So we're going into a new era now, which is obviously defined by AI. And to a large extent, we're still writing the playbook here. I'm often asked by sales executives, what changes and what remains the same? Any thoughts from your vantage point? What are the things in sales that are going to continue? And where are the areas where we might be able to, move the old ways to the side and make way for some new innovation?
Yeah, I mean, we're all faced with this. Every company's figuring out, what does AI mean to us? What does it mean to us as an organization? Do we sell AI, which we do? How do we implement those into our products to make our products better for our customers? We do that. And also, how do we take AI and make our business better? That sort of number 4, how do we reduce our costs of goods and services and our own internal costs by using it? And if you look at our chief financial officer, awesome guy, Kevin Krause, you should interview him someday. He vibe codes. This is a guy who's a hardcore financial executive, and he's building applications on a daily basis to make things that are weeks and weeks of work and spreadsheets and data, making them work in minutes. And that's part of his everyday. And he's loving it. Quite frankly, I think he's the same nerd that I was when I found my ZX81 back at the beginning of the conversation. He's really enjoying it.
We're all coders.
We are indeed. So I think that internally, we're absolutely using AI everywhere. We use it as a training engine for our salespeople, enablement. We use it for training for our partners. We're putting it in our products because we sell contact centers, as you know, and we do unified communications. And we put that into the products that help our customers engage their customers in a more fluid and effective way as well.
There's a concept called zone of genius, and various people have talked about it. It basically refers to that thing that you are uniquely gifted to do, and also that gives you energy. And the recommendation is spend as much of your time in the zone of genius as possible. What I'm most excited about with respect to AI is it takes a lot of the distractions off of your plate and allows you to stay in your zone of genius. And I believe that if we can all spend more time in the zone of genius, one, we're going to create more value because we're doing the things that we're uniquely able to do. And two, we're going to have a lot more fun doing it. So there's a lot of concerns on the horizon about AI, but I'm an optimist, and I see already in my own life the enjoyment that comes by leveraging some of these new technologies and how it does let me spend more time in that zone of genius.
Yeah, look, I love that. That's a great way to frame it. I think the thing that needs to go alongside that is the duration of change, because what AI means to us this week will be very different in next week, in the following week, and certainly next year, it'll be very different. So that zone of genius, as you say, that's almost consistent in the sense, but it's your surroundings that are going to change dramatically. And having organizations and individuals that can adapt to that is where, and adapt at the pace is going to be the interesting thing.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm actually working on a LinkedIn post right now that focuses on who will be successful in the age of AI. I actually started off by talking about the great artist Prince, Going back to the early 80s, in 1983, Prince recorded a seminal album, 1999. And what's unique about that album is he played every instrument on the album, one instrument after another. The other thing that's unique about Prince is he taught himself how to play all those instruments. Pick up an instrument, he'd play it, he'd break it, he'd figure out how to do it. But every time he learned an instrument, it created a foundation that he could build the next level of understanding on. The reason I think that that's so important for us to understand, Prince's model, which is go in and make music by teaching yourself how to play the instruments, is exactly the model that we need to embrace in the AI era. If we're expecting to walk into a classroom, have a neat syllabus, have a professor standing in front of us on a whiteboard writing things out, that is an antiquated model that no longer delivers the knowledge that we need. It's the people that can figure things out. They want to make music. They're okay breaking things, trying again. Those are the people that are going to be successful moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. Curiosity is at the beginning of of everything that we've ever invented, and I think you're absolutely right.
Well, Stephen, this has been a great conversation. Who would have guessed that kid sitting in front of the computer, original vibe coder, we'll say, has landed where you are today. You've got these beautiful pictures behind you that chronicle an incredible life, and you're making some great impact on the industry, not only in terms of what you're doing at 8x8, but just generally the leadership that you're bringing forward. So thank you for the conversation and for the insights as well.
Pleasure was all mine, Justin. I hope to run into you someday and shake your hand.
All right. I'm going to meet you out there. One note, I am a huge ice cream connoisseur. And the reason that I know MBS, they have the best chocolate ice cream of any place in the world that I've ever sampled down in the ground floor of the MBS.
I will absolutely look out for it. I'm partial to the chocolate ice cream myself.
All right. If we're ever in town, that's where we're going to meet. We're going to catch up. We're going to share some good stories.
Indeed. All the very best.
All right, Stephen.
You've been listening to Revenue Mavericks, sponsored by Tarot. Tarot is the AI-native revenue operating system that Revenue Mavericks count on to increase forecasting precision and sales productivity. Follow Tarot on LinkedIn for new episode drops and updates. Thanks for listening.